morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for November 25th, 2019. We'll begin with the special order calendar. Item number 1, continued hearings, 509-37BZ, 20201 Rocky Hill Road, Queens.
Okay, the site work was done, and I think the site looks very good, except for that asphalt area. The asphalt area, especially the portion on the street side of the fence. I'd like them to explain the situation with that. That may be what the seal coat is, the paving company letter is referring to, that they can't do that until the weather improves. I want to say I'm very happy to see that the area in the back of the building has been cleaned out and that the fuel oil tank has been removed. What I'm not sure is whether they're having problems relocating it, because they said that they have an AST heating oil relocation that requires a permit, so maybe that it could only be removed and not actually relocated without permit. I'd just like that clarified. So, and I think given how responsive the applicant has been to our directions, I'd be okay with a conditional approval to allow them to finish up and blacktop with the seal coat, reduce the curb cut, and relocate the oil tank. And yeah.
And do the street tree planting.
Street tree, oh, and street tree planting, okay. Okay. Move on? Yeah, anybody else? Okay.
Item number 2, 194-97BZ, 84-12 164th Street, Queens.
Okay. I think the landscaping looks good, although it's hard to see if curbs were installed at the edge of the planting beds. I suspect not, which means the soil just runs off. The other thing I was thinking is that I'm not even sure whether there are planting beds, that it may just be the tree balls sitting on top of the ground, and then they've covered that in dirt, because there's this kind of slope, and it's a very expensive show, because those trees are expensive, especially at that height. So I hope that this actually was a tree pit that was dug. Yeah, I know, but you have to go to the close-ups to see the tree pits. It's much later in the photos, or in another set of photos, but there's like a mound, and the dirt is very fresh. This photograph was taken immediately after the trees were installed. So I just want to kind of warn that it may be a little bit of a show. They need to, though, install wheel stops at the head of the parking spaces lining the landscaping, because you can already see a car with its head parked into the bush. And then, but I think that we can do this on condition, and hopefully they will take care of it so that the trees survive. Other comments?
Yeah. Very quickly, view number 14 in the pictures that they submitted, if you zoom in at the corner of the building where the AST tank is located, you can see that the concrete walkway around the building is discontinued, where this white painted spot is located. The grades seem to be like kind of depressed. That could be a stormwater ponding area that cause issues to the building. So if they can just concrete this part and like adjust the grades.
You're talking about the edge of the foundation, or are you
I'm talking about the corner of the building, if you
Yeah,
look
the
at-
corner that's all decayed underneath that white square?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So you're saying fix that corner, or raise the grade?
Adjust the grades, regrade, and
great.
pour concrete around that corner. This is not like a aesthetics issue. This is for them, because if it stays like that, it's gonna be a water attraction area where the water gets bonded, and it's gonna cause issues for the building. It might settle.
Commissioner Sheta, could you move your mic like a
Sure.
little forward? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that must have been broken off when they installed the planting, is my guess, but I don't know. Okay. Anybody else?
Item number 3, 200-98BZ, 633 Third Avenue, Brooklyn, Manhattan.
Okay, they have provided proof of continuous use since the April 2018 expiration, and plans were amended to show points of access and egress from the street level. Is everybody okay with this? Uh-huh.
Item number 4, 24503BZ, 160-11 Willets Point Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, plans were amended, but unfortunately are not internally consistent. So just as a list of the problems that I found, the trash enclosure is not shown or labeled on the main site plan. It's just on like maybe the maneuverability diagram. The parking in the rear sign is not shown on the plans or in the elevations. They need to show dimensions and details of the planting beds and include curbing. Also, I'd like to understand why the planting doesn't continue for the entire length of the residential property line. It just sort of stops at spots haphazardly. And they need to clarify on the drawings the extent of the acoustical fence. There's just kind of one arrow and the fence isn't clearly delineated. Anybody else?
Do you want them to provide specs for the acoustical fence? Typically, we have asked for.
Okay.
Are we okay with the noise levels at the residential?
So the fact that it spreads over and it says is at 45 dBA, or actually less, it says like 21 at the first one and then something else, 28 at the next, that's lower than ambient levels. But I think that's the reason for the acoustical fence, which I'm sure they're not taking into account when they do that analysis.
That was one of my
Yeah,
actual
because they
questions.
should just show it spreading beyond, and the fence should be stopping it if the board speaker is lower than 6 feet, which it should be, because how can you use it otherwise, right?
Yeah, it's usually like 3
Yeah.
feet or so, so it's the car window.
Right, so that just sort of by definition, you shouldn't be getting such a wide band. So they didn't give us an elevation of the noise, they only gave us a plan of the noise, so you can't really see how it's transmitting.
Is this based on measurements or mathematical model?
I think that these are not based on measurements, these are usually based on the spec sheets from the supplier of the menu board. And they're installing new menu boards, right? So they're adding another one, there's like a double hello, and then there's a second hello.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think maybe what they could do is clarify from those spec sheets in elevation, the direction of the sound, so that you can verify that the 6-foot fence is high enough, that the 6-foot acoustical fence is high enough. Because it really does have a wide spread
Yeah.
onto the residential property. That's a lot of mac and cheeses being ordered. So,
Yeah,
okay.
because if it's rotated, then this entire shading rotates. It's different, it's totally different distribution.
So you're saying just turn the speaker a little bit more up into the property?
If the speaker is facing, let's say, that direction, I believe the speaker now is going like that from the two boards. If you just rotate the entire thing, the spread will probably rotate with the direction of the propagation.
Okay. So
But wouldn't it-
one is
If
to
you see-
reorient the speaker direction.
There are windows.
It wouldn't
Yeah,
be
yeah.
closer to the residential.
Right,
Yeah,
the only
it would
problem is how
actually
does
be
that work
closer.
How does it work?
As regarding the line of
Right.
cars,
Right.
because you need a car length space between the speakers. Otherwise, both speakers are going to be pointing to one car. And I think the whole idea is to have each speaker pointing to a separate car,
Yeah.
so that this way you can process the line faster by
Right,
working on
it's a
them.
pull-up speaker,
Yeah.
right? Pull up to the next one, and they'll take 2 orders at a time.
Right, at the same time.
I
Yeah,
think the chair is right. I don't think the acoustical fence is being considered in this diagram. And
I don't think so, yeah.
I think if they
Yeah.
show that, I don't think we'd have an issue.
right, so I think what we need is an elevation showing the propagation of sound horizontally, I mean, in elevation, and then we have it in plan, and then we can see that if 6 feet is high enough. Plus, there's shrubs being planted, so it's shrubs plus 6 feet. That's the idea of the shrubs. They're much better absorbers than the acoustical fence, and then the acoustical fence would be a reflector, right? So, okay. So,
Go on.
uh-huh.
Yes. New cases, item number 5, 33559BZ, 3485-95 Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn, also known as 315-321 Nichols Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. We do have proof of service of initial application to officials, but I didn't find proof of notice of hearing or the community board recommendation. The zoning district for this site was changed in September to a C2-4 overlay in an R5, so it's not a R, yeah. So, so they need to provide an updated zoning map and update the materials to reflect this. This is a use group 16 use though, so it's not as of right in that new district. But clearly now the zoning is anticipating a character that's commercial. That area was completely rezoned over the years, but this was a little piece that was just added in September to allow for the development of a 1-story commercial building, which was commercial before, but just non-conforming. It's kind of odd to actually have a rezoning when you have a non-conforming use, but never mind. I just want to make a general comment that it's for this reason that zoning maps need to be checked before every initial and every final decision, because you could find out that the purpose of the waiver is moot, or that you need far more waivers because it was somehow downzoned. And that needs to be something that the applicant does, so right before the hearing, they should be submitting the most recent zoning map, but also our project managers should be checking before it's calendared that it's still the same zoning. This was only done, you know, like 2 months ago, so you wouldn't have picked it up on the initial submission, right? Though you may have known about it. So also, there are just on this specific site, there are many miscellaneous signs that need to be removed. They need to comply with the C24 regulations. The little structure on a site is in need of painting and repair. It's pretty shabby. There's razor wire, and then there's a car wash sign, which may be sitting on the subject property or on the wall of the adjoining property, which is it was a gas station that's about to be dismantled. So it seems to me there isn't anybody who would object to the removal of a car wash sign when there's no car wash, and the razor wire. The chain link fence is bent in parts, so it should be replaced or repaired. And also, I didn't see that the board permitted open fencing on this site. Actually, it was indicated on the notes of the last plans that the fencing was to have 100% aluminum stripping, which it doesn't have. They need to provide BSA-approved plans for the 2009 approval and a lumen spread diagram.
Same. Though on my site visit, I did see the fence was in a better condition, so they should provide more updated photographs. But I agree with the lumen and the signage.
The razor wire was removed from the side of the lot that abuts the residential as well as the street line, but it remains on the side that's abutting the closed lot. So I assume that they just don't want people to climb over that fence and get into their thing. So I'm almost willing to allow them to keep that razor wire there or put something there temporarily. However, I think the brackets for the razor wire that's on the residential lot line and the street lot lines should be removed because there's no longer razor wire there and there shouldn't be razor wire there. But I am sympathetic to them regarding the lot next door because there's no way to control it because it's all, it's fenced off, but people could get in there and there's nobody watching the store, so to speak.
Right. Okay.
I just want to note that there is a car parked on the sidewalk in the Google images on this site. I also want to note that it seems like the grass facing the residence side is overgrown. There's a portion of grass and trees that just seems really unruly. Since we have nothing from the community board, I want to reserve before I say we might want to send notice to the neighbors about this site, but I think
Okay,
that's on my mind.
Right, so I don't know if we have a community board recommendation, it's just not in the folder, so we need to get that. The application was submitted in June, so that's that time where maybe the community
Summer
board
break,
doesn't meet. So arguably, they'd had a meeting in September, but I don't know. Okay.
I think with regards to the vehicles parked on the sidewalk, with regards to vehicles parked on the sidewalk, they can just provide signage along the property line indicating no.
Yeah.
And I think some of the photos that they had submitted also
Indicating no.
no vehicles parked on the sidewalk. I'm sorry. It's like one of the standard things we keep saying, so I'm just.
Right. Anybody else?
No, I shared the same comments with the board. My concern was the fence next to the residential, and I believe they need to take care of that. Make sure it's in good shape. The site is very close to that building.
Yeah, okay.
Move on.
Okay.
Item number 6, 38985 BZ, 2090 Bronxdale Avenue, the Bronx.
All right. We have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, but I didn't find a community board recommendation. This was submitted in February, so we should have a recommendation. The description should add, the description on our calendar here should add that this is an application for an amendment as well as an extension of term. The application itself was amended to reflect this and the fee paid.
Right.
Applicant correctly requests a waiver of our rules in order to amend, to file late, but it's citing to the wrong section. It should be 1-07.3B3, not B2.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's when you allow for a late filing. This variance expired in November 2015 and was filed in February 2019, which is more than 2 years but less than 10 from expiration. The notice of comments and the applicant's response to the notice of comments cited the correct section, but in the process of amending the statement, they missed that. They need to also demonstrate continuous use. They showed Google Street View imagery from the time period. If that's sufficient, I'm good with that.
Yeah, because if you go on, there's every year basically, except for 2015, and that's the year it was expired, so.
Okay, great. They did attempt the substantial prejudice argument, which is one of our standards, but it's not the substantial prejudice to the community. It's a substantial prejudice to the owner that would occur if you had to discontinue. I know there are like beloved stores and things for the community, but what about the owner? It would way be worse. Communities just find other places to shop, right? The requested amendment is as to the term, which has been 10 years, and the request is for 15. I think we could allow a 10-year beginning at the time of the grant because they filed late, but I don't think we should vary from the 10-year term, which is really standard. Not even sure if we're allowed to, frankly. The existing sign will be removed to comply with C2-3 regs. No variance was granted for the sign, so it has to comply. And I don't see why, as is suggested by the applicant, that it needs to wait for our determination to correct a non-conforming sign. It just needs to do it. I mean, EOB would require that as a violation, whether the use is conforming or non-conforming. There are many miscellaneous signs that should be removed if they exceed what's permitted in a C23, and they should be shown on signage drawings and calculations. The building and canopy are in need of a paint job. The asphalt should be resurfaced. And I didn't find photos of the dumpster enclosure or the plantings at the corner near the main sign. Street view shows it's just overgrown and unmanaged grass. They need to provide a landscaping plan and actually landscape according to it. I think of it as a really small gesture to the community, considering that the entire Brady frontage could have been landscaped without interfering with operations, and that side faces an apartment building that's just across the street. So I think in another time, we would have required that they landscape along Brady, because there's kind of no reason not to. We have a fire department letter of no objection, and I just want to commend the applicant for a refreshingly accurate compliance certification list, where they actually go through the ways in which the site is non-compliant, and then it's signed and sealed. It's just like heartwarming. Okay. Anybody else?
I have a question. As I see on the plan, that the air pump and the vacuum machine is located at the corner of White Plains and Brady Avenue. It's actually more on the White Plains. And it's right next to the concrete block trash enclosure. I'm not sure how conveniently that is located in terms of vehicles using it. So my question is, can that be moved to about the existing one-story building next to the handicap parking space? There is an additional parking space, so that could be used for vehicles that wants to use the vacuum.
Oh, up against the building
Up against the
instead.
building, as opposed to on the sidewalk, because my concern is that may encourage vehicles to be parked on the sidewalk.
Don't they have two vacuum pumps?
There is one at this location, and
They
I
have
think there's
two.
another one on the Bronx
Right.
Avenue Eastern. So my question is with regards to the one that's along the White Plains. And that's right next to the trash enclosure. So it's not a very ideal location for a vehicle. It may either block the entryway or it may be on the sidewalk. So what if that were to be moved next to the building as opposed to being on the sidewalk, or next to the sidewalk? It's a question I have. Do you have any?
There is a typo in the fire department letter. The case number is 38985. It's not 95. And the submission notice has the same typo as well.
So it's a typo on the fire department letter of no objection?
Yes, the fire department letter describes the case as 389-85.
Okay.
And same does the submission notice to us.
Oh, okay. So, but it's the right address?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. It says 9-5, right? Okay. Fix that. Okay. Item number 7, 31608BZ, 345 to 349 Second Avenue, Manhattan.
We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval. This is an application to allow the merger of a zoning lot that is the subject of a BSA variance with another zoning lot to allow the transfer of excess development rights from the BSA site to the adjoining development site under the Bella Vista case law test. That the development rights transfer does not create a windfall for the recipient of the variance. in this case, a not-for-profit school. The application would amend the size of the zoning lot, hence the approved site plan, which is why one of the reasons they have to come to us. It has been 10 years since the time of the grant, and the application was for a not-for-profit, so no financial hardship had to be established. No variance for floor area was granted for this school building, and that's important because we've had requests to allow a zoning lot merger to transfer floor area when there had been a waiver that increased the floor area, so that would be a no. But in this case, no variance for floor area was granted. It was only for minimum street wall height, so the floor area was not implicated in the variance application. Site plan P-1 should clarify which is the variance site, which is the 62 by 70 foot corner lot, because it's a little unclear about, there's sort of this shadow. The floor plan is shown with a shadow, and the shadow makes it look like there's some bold tax lot line or something, so they need to clarify which is the variance site. Anybody else?
I have a concern. So while I don't have a problem with this amendment, because as you had said, the property is a not-for-profit and they weren't asking for floor area, my concern is now that they've taken all of the available floor area off of their development site, that they may come in the future requesting floor area for programmatic needs. And so is there a way we could condition this grant? So that prevents that from happening, because then that becomes a for-profit kind of venture.
Yes, right.
You sell off all your development rights and then come back and get more for programmatic needs, and that would be my issue with it.
Right. No, I think it's a very good point. They arguably held on to floor area initially because they were planning some expansion. And the idea that a not-for-profit is never going to be expanded is not our experience, right? Schools always expand. So I understand that they need the money from the developer, but this means that forevermore, they're going to have to either look to an adjoining property for additional floor area. And the developer's zoning lot development agreement also often will exclude the possibility of a future addition on the transferor's site because they don't want their windows blocked, right? So they need to understand that the only possibility of expansion is horizontally to somebody else's property, and very likely not even on top of their own existing building. So I agree with you, it really is. And we've seen lots and lots of cases of sort of short-sighted not-for-profits. We had one very recently where they had sold off all their development rights, and now they realize that they need to expand, and there's nothing we can do because it's self-created, and the not-for-profit is subject to self-created finding also.
Right.
Okay. I think that's important.
I agree with both of you. I actually agree and then strongly agree. But should we look at the previous floor area waiver, if any? I understand
there
was
wasn't
not.
a
Yes, I just said it.
Okay,
I
sorry.
understand it was not. But on some sites, probably you don't have the ability to benefit from the entire available floor area because of other limitations like setback, height restrictions. So I believe, and I'm not sure if you share the same opinion with me, I believe we should look at other waivers that was granted. If these waiver enabled additional floor area, then whatever was available, I'm not saying whatever was permitted, I'm saying whatever was available based on the zoning requirements of the zoning district.
Well, setback waivers always allow you to use floor area naturally, right? Because in a school, it typically gets a setback waiver because they have a gym or whatever, and the gym needs a full lot coverage,
Okay.
right? And so they're doing it because the gym needs the lot coverage, but in the end, of course, they have more floor area on that floor than would normally be allowed. But it's not because they have an increase over the allowable floor area. It's simply that the configuration of the floor area is different than what was allowed, right? So for us to say, no, you can't come back for a height and setback waiver or a yard waiver or something is really a different thing, as long as they're just using the floor area that's still pertinent to their property, right? And I think, but I didn't read their zoning lot development agreement, I don't know if they even gave us one, that they may be holding on to a little bit of floor area for their own use. And so in that case, if they needed a setback waiver to use the floor area they held on to, that's one thing. But they can't come and ask us, oh, look, it's not big enough, it's only one classroom and we need 4, right? That kind of thing. Okay.
And to agree with the board, I believe that this case, this application meets the 6 standards identified in Bella Vista.
Please speak up and
I agree
into
with the
mic.
board. I believe that this case meets the 6 standards identified in Bella Vista. I also believe that if they were to come back and seek further variance to expand, that it would be a self-created hardship that would I think we should probably identify same in our resolution.
Yeah, okay.
Not to expand, to ask for like
Increase the
additional.
floor area.
To
Floor
increase
area,
the
yeah.
floor
In-
area
not to increase
beyond
the-
what,
Yep.
Ready? Item number 8, 2409 BZ, 78-10, 164th Road, Queens.
There are no notice requirements for an extension of time to complete. The applicant requests a waiver of our rules under 1.07.3C3, which is less than 4 years after expiration. The variance lapsed on July 26, 2015. I'd like them to verify that the submission was actually made before 7/26/19, as the timestamp on the PDF is 7/29/19. So I know that sometimes our stamps are off by a little bit. The reasons given for not beginning construction almost 9 years after the original grant are significant. I don't see what assurances we have that the project will proceed, and there is no discussion of whether neighborhood conditions or the programmatic needs have changed, and which may now make this facility as planned either kind of irrelevant or less desirable. It was, after all, planned when healthcare and perhaps nursing home care was arguably different than it is today. We've seen a lot of changes, certainly in healthcare, and in actually nursing home care. We've also seen changes reflected, for instance, in the change in the zoning resolution. A certificate of need is required when developing a nursing home, according to the New York State Department of Health website. The application for this one was granted contingent approval in 2010 and withdrawn in 2015, so they don't even have a certificate of need anymore. I'm concerned about this. I don't think variances should be extended indefinitely when arguably the purpose for which they were granted is no longer the purpose. The resolution, the approval, BSA resolution, indicates there had been some opposition from the community about the size of the facility, citing, this is from the resolution, the impact of the proposed enlargement on the immediately adjacent homes and surrounding neighborhood character. And then I also say that they say that a new architect was hired, but I don't see new drawings that reflect that progress has been made with the new architect. Is it more that there is no new architect and that the prior architect has resigned or was terminated? It's more likely. There have been no DOB filings associated with this project at all, except for the initial one to come before us back in 2010. The use of the other 4 lots that were to be developed as storage, to be, they're currently being used for storage for the nursing home, was known at the time of the 2009 grant. That's how they were being used. But I think the assumption at that time was that the uses would discontinue to allow the building to be constructed. And so that's an illegal use because the Cs of O are for residential. All the buildings are owned by someone connected with the nursing home, like individuals connected with the nursing home. There's a 2001 open ECB violation on Lot 11 that is a rather disturbing non-conforming use of the site. I'd like to understand the conditions today. It talks about storage of really, let's say, undesirable for residential use objects. I think that lot can't be used for, and then there's a vacant lot that's being used for open storage, containers, and dumpsters for the nursing home. That's not an allowable use in this, on that site or in this district. They didn't provide a copy of the BSA resolution in the submission, which they should do. I just found it online, but they need to provide it. Other comments?
I think they should formally address the idea of abandonment, frankly,
Okay.
because they let the site deteriorate.
Yes.
I just want to add that they haven't even addressed a certain timeline on when they believe this would be completed. They really state nothing of the future of this project.
And then abandonment is under, there's the three-pronged test under Putnam. So all the tests should be gone through. In fact, it's a six-pronged test under Putnam. Right? Abandonment is, anyway, all the tests. We'll check because there is a three-prong and then another three-prong depending on how long it's been going on. And I think abandonment is the second set. Yeah, okay.
Do you need financing to show this proof of financing, or is it not necessary?
Well, in other words, they're saying, you know, everything has been difficult, and it's so difficult, it's difficult, and we don't have an architect, and we don't have really anything, and they withdrew their application for a notice of, certificate of, and
Doesn't seem like they're even close to financing. They haven't
No.
even partnered with a developer yet.
right. So, and I'm thinking that, you know, the design of the building was just a continuation of a rather dreary building, and maybe now it's time to look at how it is nursing home care, how has it changed? Maybe you need outdoor space, maybe there are other things that the Department of Health, State Department of Health would require that isn't in this nursing home, which has a very low rating when you go on Yelp and things like that. It doesn't look like it's a very desirable place.
Well, that was part of their hardship
Yes.
argument.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Appeals calendar, item number 9, 2018-129A, 484F, Sharretts Road, Staten Island.
Just a second. Okay. All right. A builder's pavement plan for Marjorie Street and Sharretts Road was provided. I'm just curious, this is really a curiosity. The steel face of the curb is being eliminated on the Marjorie Street curbs, whereas you retain it or provide it on Sharretts. And I'm just curious why, where you have truck stops, and so the trucks are going up and down that curb, the curb cuts on either side, and there are many of them, why you wouldn't have steel face? That seems to be the place where you really need it, so that the curb doesn't get completely squashed. Because this is a relatively small enlargement of an existing building, I'm actually okay with conditioning approval on working with DEP to obtain their approvals so as to incorporate their requirements in our resolution, and also the condition and their conditions along with fire department's conditions However, I don't know if fire department had any further comments relative to access from Marjorie. We had asked them. Okay. So I don't, they have access from a much narrower way from Sharrett's. It goes down that way that's no parking and relies on them complying with no parking, whereas Marjorie is an open, unmapped way, wherever it is. And so fire department has kind of clear access there, assuming again that it's not heavily parked. This part, I don't know. So, anybody else on that?
Yeah, I have two comments. One of them is actually kind of administrative. The letter from the engineer regarding the septic design, he's saying that he concluded that the enlargement is going to be okay for the size of the existing septic. I understand that the DOP will review that, but later on, the submission says that he will need to perform percolation testing. So apparently, he concluded based on the previous design capacity that was based on something else. I don't know, but we need to convey this to the DOB that they are indicating that they will need to perform percolation testing, and in the meantime, they concluded that everything is pinky and nice.
So in other words, a general statement, the DOB shall review the.
Exactly, yes.
It's the soil drainage, right? It's the, what is it, the general subject?
That the DOP,
yeah.
we need to send whatever they gave us related to the DOB forward to the DOB, because I see two contradicting statements.
No, so.
In the submission.
Right, so what we normally do is we alert DOB in general to the situation and just say it's DOB to look at the question. But so the question is septic design versus perk tests, is that?
Septic design, to perform it right, you need to do some percolation test
Okay,
to make sure how big is the septic and how much flow they can handle. You need to perform a percolation test. Supposedly, this percolation test was done like long ago when they performed the initial design. But in this submission, they are doing two contradicting things. Number one, he's saying based on the previous design that I assumed that it was done based on percolation testing, the enlargement could be handled. And further on, he says I need to perform percolation testing
right, okay.
to make sure. So-
All right, so how about we say DOB to review the adequacy of the septic system?
Yep.
Okay, that's all.
This is one thing. The other thing regarding the roadway sections, and we need to get this on every typical building paper plan. We need to add a note saying that all private roadway sections that are part of the subject application will conform to all applicable requirements of the city and state DOTs or the requirements of a site-specific engineering design for the roadway sections that's prepared by a qualified New York PE, whichever is more stringent. So by adding this note, we're asking them to either comply with the DOT requirements, or if they believe that the DOT requirements are not sufficient and they want to put something that's thicker and stronger, they could do that.
Okay. We already have a note about having to comply with DOT on all of our resolutions. DOT requirements for the paving standard.
Yes, but sometimes DOT requirements are very typical. So sometimes DOT tells you that you need 3-inch of asphalt concrete, and if you go to a site which is in a marshland or like really bad subsurface conditions, you might need something more stronger than the DOT requirements.
So we can say instead comply at a minimum with DOT requirements.
We could say that,
What,
yes.
how could you say whichever one is more stringent
Yeah.
if there's no standard?
No, right.
There's no legal standard.
And who is
Right.
reviewing
Who's
that to make that
determining that?
determination?
Yeah, so we would say at a minimum must meet DOT standards, right? Because that's the way the building code works.
I am okay with that.
Yeah,
And eliminating the part that's related to the engineer, or you could add the engineer study to that. So they look at the DOT And in the meantime, their engineer should look at whatever DOT calls for and determine whether this is acceptable or not.
I think my concern is that I agree, I understand the issue that you're stating. However, there's no one that is going to test to determine the engineer's report.
Right.
When you do a geotech, when we do like subsurface investigation, part of the investigation is to give recommendations for the roadways.
No, I understand this, but, so the thing is, as you know, we're not reviewing any of this once it goes forward. All we can do is alert DOB that we haven't reviewed those things, right? Or that DOT hasn't reviewed those things. So we alert DOB that the roadways need to be graded and laid and so on pursuant to, at minimum, DOT requirements. But to then get us somehow or other involved in how DOB or DOT, because how DOB reviews these things, it's like very difficult in terms, it's difficult, right? So to say, DOB, go ask their engineer to decide whether the engineer's idea is a better idea than DOT's idea, right? So I think that the system where building code, fire code, plumbing code, electrical code are all minimum standards. And as long as you meet the minimum standards, DOB will approve the project,
That's
right?
correct.
And if you want to do something fancier, be their guest, as long as it doesn't somehow undermine the standard, which it can, like, you know, rain screens and things like that were something that didn't meet standards, and they needed, and then DOB and testing labs and so on had to figure out how to make them meet standards. But as long as DOB is okay with the modification on a standard and it's equally safe, they have the authority to allow that, right? I don't want to get into us.
I'm not getting
Yeah,
into
yeah.
anything. I'm not
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
into anything. I'm just adding this note to make sure that they're gonna grab whatever DOT calls for or whatever their engineer believes that it's appropriate.
But that'll
Whichever is
happen
stringent.
anyway, but that happens anyway in the review of drawings. As long as we say that the roadway has to comply with DOT standards for minimum standards for roadway design and construction, then that's an instruction, right? Because part of the problem with these private roads is they often don't meet DOT standards. You're not going to get someone to volunteer to build better than is required by DOT on these roadways. If anything, they're going to build worse. They're going to build without steel curbs. They're going to have the asphalt just sort of trickling off. They're going to have the slope of the roadbed be not a slope.
And
Having
when
been
you-
to this,
Well, when you articulate a policy, there has to be a standard that is implementable. And to say whichever is more stringent is not implementable. It's too arbitrary. It's based on whoever happens to be looking at it and what their point of view is. And it's not going to be clearly communicating to the public what's required. Whereas to say you have to meet a minimum standard as set by DOT or DOB, that's very clear. You can look on the internet, you can find what the standards are, and you can comply very easily.
And you
Now,
can
having-
decide you want to do more than that.
having been to the site, I believe a minimum standard would be an improvement
Yes.
to the adjacent areas.
Right,
Um,
right.
And I certainly appreciate what you're saying, Commissioner, that a minimum standard needs to be met here.
Right, yeah. Okay, I think, we can have a conversation in general about this general subject, but I think for now, we should move on to the next
Okay.
application. Any other comments on this?
Item number 10, 2018-178A, 2 Oak Tree Way, also known as 300 Ocean Terrace, Staten Island.
We were waiting for city planning response on their review of this application. I think this is the cart before the horse type story. I do think we need to wait until they've made their determination, and that gives the time for applicant to coordinate also with DEP and fire department's conditions.
I uploaded an email.
Sorry?
Did you see my email?
I don't know. Which email?
There was an email from DEP, CPC, from Ron Reniston. Should have been uploaded into the folder.
No, didn't see. Was it sent to all of us?
Should have been uploaded into the file.
I don't know, but we need a determination, right?
All right.
So it needs to be formal, right?
All right.
And there are DEP and fire department conditions that then there's time to actually work the project through them. And they gave us, the applicant gave us information that they have 3 years on the DEC wetland permits. So that's plenty of time to finish up with those agencies and begin construction and so on. So I think it really should be done in the right order.
I just add that they did submit a hardship argument, which I'm satisfied with.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'll forward you it again, but okay.
Well, does
new
it
case-
change anything? I mean, I don't know. Who's it from?
It's from Ron Reniston. He's
Who
the
is?
project, he's the planner and project manager on Oak Tree.
But did he say they're reviewing it? Like, what did he tell?
It's
Okay. He just says, project status. Thank you for discussing the above application. To summarize, the applicant has previously submitted a proposed site plan to city planning. The site is located in a special natural area district, and the plan requires city planning commission authorizations, which are discretionary. And it says, if an applicant requests a discretionary zoning action from the CPC, the commissioners can and often request that issues such as those raised by other agencies be resolved before voting on the application. So, you know, we've had this conversation before. We always wait until we get sign
Chicken
off
and egg.
from all the other agencies. Their review is much broader than ours, and we depend on it. So, you know, hot potato back to them. Okay. Okay.
New cases, item number 11, 2019-166A, 8 Madigan Place, Staten Island. Is that how you pronounce it, Madigan? Yeah.
We do have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval. Applicant did explain why it would suffer a hardship as a one-family home on this corner lot that's not able to front the adjacent CCO street under GCL 36-3A. Madigan is not a CCO street, oddly, but I don't see why they wouldn't be able to qualify for a waiver under GCL 36-3B, unless no other houses on Madigan obtained GCL waivers, which is one of the requirements from BSA. I noticed that there's a house across the street that was just received a new building permit, but I think they may have filed a long time ago initially and then re-upped or something like that. There are many new houses on the block, that's why I asked that. There's a statement, representation in the city planning application, so this needs to go through a lot of different city planning approvals, that this lot 161 was held separately from all other tracts of land prior to 1961. I'm not sure because I didn't pursue what the SNAD permit requires, but I don't think that that's a true statement. Staten Island, as we know, has a completely different kind of access to their deeds, and I never have been able to figure out how to get access to the deeds. But on Acris, you can find real property tax transfer documents. And it shows that lot 168, which is right adjacent and has access directly to whatever that other street is called, Wilson View Place, was owned in common until 2017. So that affects the hardship argument, and also may affect the SNAD. I just don't know what the findings are for the authorization under a SNAD. I'd also like a little more information on why fronting Wilson View Place is not possible. I believe it's because the space between the street line and the house is an area of non-disturbance, hence required to be forested, but there was no explanation. It just says it's not possible. But on the other hand, Madigan has many large homes fronting on it, so, you look at that. The applicant did provide a copy of a July 2019 application to city planning to allow development in the natural area on a steep slope and requiring other waivers. I'd like to know the status of that because they only applied in July, so. Or, I'm not sure if they applied, we just have the materials. You don't see it like stamped, received by city
All right, we
planning.
can email.
Sorry?
Well, I'll email CPC.
Okay, we also don't have anything from fire department and obviously not from city planning on this. So the application may be premature with respect to that, but this issue of common ownership may come back to bite it. You can see on the survey, that's sort of the giveaway, that the house that's on lot 168 has like steps and porches and things that continue onto this lot. That's what made me suspicious. It's like, how come you're occupying somebody else's property? And the answer is because it was mine. So, okay.
Zoning calendar, continued hearing items, item number 12, 4311BZ, 1926 East 21st Street.
Just as a reminder, on this application, because it's been going on for a long time, the existing building was not built according to the approved plans, and that all discrepancies between the approved plans and the actual as-built must be corrected to comply with the Department of Buildings approved drawings, which were stamped approved on May 17th, 2018. Assuming the below or the above is not an issue, I think the required corrections to the materials have been made. Oh, sorry, it's a below comment, so there is a comment. When I compare the building height on the approved drawings to what was submitted to us, the approved drawings show both the perimeter wall height and the total height measured off of grade at elevation 0, and also, like the proposed drawings, the height measured off of 2.8 elevation base plane. So it's either from 0 or 2.8. I don't know which one is correct, which either means the building is 2.8 feet too tall, or it's just it's like a drafting error. So if it's too tall, then that's a serious problem because it's maxed out in terms of allowable perimeter wall height. If measured off of whatever it's measured off of, right? So they need to verify what's correct. And because we've been going on so long with this, I would like the architect and owner must appear.
Anybody else?
Okay?
Good, Melinda.
Yeah?
Did you check the calculations for the open space? Because I tried to check them, and I believe the figures that was given in the submission are not accurate. I believe the open space, the correct figure is 56.53%, not 56.3.
56 point what?
0.53.
Oh,
Yeah, not 56.3. I believe the one that's given in the submission is based on the lot area, which is 4,000 square feet, not based on the floor area, which is,
so this is a site that requires open space ratio or open space? So that's the thing. If it's open space, it's based on the lot area. If it's open space ratio, it's based on the floor area. The zoning district, which zoning district is this?
This is our
R3 to, without looking it up, I get confused. I'm not sure which is which. But anyway, so they need to check which one applies and make sure the calculations are correct.
It's open space, not open space ratio.
Okay,
That's
so
what-
it's
that's
based
what
on the
it-
lot area. If it's open space, it's based on the lot area, not the floor area.
Okay.
So then, is it correct then, if it's based on the lot area?
Yes, if it is, yes, it's
Okay,
correct.
so then it's not a problem. Okay. So in order to know that, you need to look at the zoning resolution and see which of those two criteria apply in that zoning district.
Okay.
Because oddly, it's different where you wouldn't think it would be different. Okay.
Move on. Item number 13, 268-14BZ, 231-06-10 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
They requested a withdrawal.
Item number 14, 157-15BZ, 3925 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn.
The materials have been submitted late, resulting in adjournments so many times that you have to look into folders submitted in August to have any idea what's going on. I acknowledge there was a change in ownership that led to some of the delay, but nonetheless, crazy. In August, plans were revised to show a 588 square foot, two-story extension at the rear that reduces the rear yard to 23 feet at the first floor and a complying 30 feet at the second floor, and increases for the extension, complying 5'1" and 16.6 side yards. No proposed total FAR was shown on the plan, but the BSA calculation sheet indicated it exceeded 1 FAR, and we directed that this be brought down, and it should, of course, be shown on the plan. In September, the plans were revised, but too late for our review, claiming that the floor area in the attic had been miscalculated and that now the floor area was 1 FAR, though there had been no change to the project. No floor area calculations were provided or area below structural headroom was shown. So how do you come to that conclusion? What makes no sense about either of these submissions is that the claimed existing floor area is either 3,406 square feet or 3,432 square feet, where only 2,000 square feet is the permitted as of right FAR, floor area. So the application must be an attempt to legalize the overbuilt area without so stating or indicating. This led us to question the legality of the non-complying front and side yards. A set of 1995 DOB-approved drawings was then provided in September, it's in the September 21, 18 folder. They showed that the proposed floor area was 2,737.5 square feet, or 0.685 FAR, including floor area in the attic. So clearly, the house was overbuilt by about 700 square feet. Either that, or the calculations today are different from the 1995 calculations. The 1995 drawing even provides a floor area diagram of the attic to clarify what areas are under structural headroom between 5 and 8 feet, and what areas were enlarged. So unless there was an overbuild, the numbers should be the same today, and they aren't. The front yard was shown as a complying 10'1" on the drawings, whereas the current drawings and survey show it's a non-complying 9'8". The 1995 edition is also shown as short unrequired side yard dimensions. The 1995 drawings also showed a parking garage at the rear, which presumably provided the one required parking space. The BSA zoning chart indicates there is no parking as an existing non-complying condition, even though the existing conditions drawings show the garage. I'm just not understanding this. We've been trying to get the architect on this project to clear up the overbuilt issues since the start of the project. Somehow that message is not getting through. I want the architect and owner to appear tomorrow, or we adjourn.
Item number 15, 231 15BZ, 5278 Post Road, The Bronx.
At the last scheduled hearing in September, upon the absence of a timely submission, the board sent a dismissal warning letter to the applicant and the owner indicating that no further adjournments would be permitted. The only submitted materials that we're reviewing today appear to be those stamped as submitted on September 13th, 2019, with no subsequent timely submissions since. We have several new letters in opposition to this project. One, a very detailed analysis of the application from Council for Community Board Aid. Other opposition letters, including from Broadway Community Alliance, also go into detail about the submission. All conclude that uniqueness has not been established, that rock is the standard in the neighborhood, that the alternative presented that avoids any rock removal instead of 80% rock removal, as was previously proposed, is disingenuous and misleading, that there are alternative developments that could be pursued as of right, that the site acquisition costs are grossly inflated, that the building is too large for the neighborhood, and expressing concerns about the traffic conditions at the Broadway frontage. One submission includes a detailed listing and map plotting with accompanying photos, rock outcroppings, and steep slopes in the area. I just want to say I'm very impressed with the quality of the submissions by the various opponents. A lot of research went into preparing those submissions. The applicant's cover letter confusingly states that it will not amend the project to remove the use group 6 use and lower the building height until it hears whether the board is persuaded about the A and B findings, which sounds like it's not persuaded by its A and B findings, or they would have amended their project. This from the outset is nonsensical, since construction costs and return on investment are tied to the uses and size of the building. The cover letter does not summarize the result of the supplied studies, and no revised statement of facts was provided, so the board is expected to go it alone and review each study independently without benefit of coordination or tie-in by owner's counsel. So that's what we did. We reviewed each study. The uniqueness study starts off by stating that there is no readily available data on the area's large outcroppings. But as we know, geotechnical data for the entire city is available and regularly used by geotechnical engineers. The submission by one of the neighbors cataloged very nicely the visible rock outcroppings on a topographical map. The previously submitted uniqueness study also showed the contours of steep hills and outcroppings. The uniqueness study essentially argues that the site is unique because it has the steepest slope and rock outcropping within the R6 zoning district, the R6 district being a narrowly circumscribed border along Broadway extending to Post Road. All the other districts are R4 and less. There don't appear to be any vacant sites in that study area either. So even if we accepted the premise of uniqueness as to the tiny R6 district, so you can do this by saying the district is really small, I'm the only one, the conditions on the site have to present a hardship in development that would not be typical of the area, not typical of Midtown Manhattan. The topographic sectional study was quite interesting in pointing out that the site with severe slopes already developed probably experienced some degree of leveling out when they were developed. So there were some sites that, it was actually an interesting study of showing sections through some sites in the area that are R or not in the R6. And you can see that they had severe slopes and then the building was located on it. So obviously that slope was topped off a little bit to flatten it for that building. And so, but you can't know without going back in history to see what the slope was like. So for example, Site J, which is located on the west side of Post Road, north of 254th Street, is the only vacant lot presented for consideration in the study area, although I think there are others, and shows similar pre-development conditions to the subject lot. So you see it's quite a steep slope with kind of an outcropping, and it's just not developed. So to develop it, you would need to do some kind of grade change of some type, right, or not. The explanation that the school building across the street that's built on pilotis on rock outcroppings did that for dramatic effect isn't credible, first of all. And there are many versions of such projects throughout the world where they are forced to deal with such natural terrain because it is a good idea to do so and often more economical to do so. And in the case that was mentioned at the last hearing of the Roscoe Brown project, there was a not-for-profit housing developer whose construction cost was limited by public financing and who built the building entirely around the boulders that obstruct the property. So I think the argument is disingenuous that not-for-profits intentionally go for wow factor when actually they're driven by economics as much as any other development site. In fact, developers of residential so-called luxury housing go for wow factor too, right?
It just turned out what they did with the site resulted in a wow factor.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, so when you walk by that Roscoe Brown site, it's a total wow, right? How could they? This is amazing, right? And also for the school site, which was built as a dormitory. You don't throw a lot of money at dormitories, right? The simplest way to understand the site, though, is the site topographical map that shows sidewalk grade at Post Road at elevation 66, which is met by the rise from Broadway at elevation 43. On the northern wing of the site, the elevation rises to elevation 70, 75, and 80, a 15-foot difference from the Post Road street level. So the obvious question is, why not just build beginning at elevation 66 with perhaps an open first floor at the north side of the project that either works around the slope, lifting up the second floor on pilotis, or cutting the rock down for that portion by 15 feet. In addition, the as of right shows the building set back 28 feet from the property line. That's the old as of right. Shows the building set back 28 feet from the property line, somehow related to the mapped but unopened street on that side. So that reduces the need to remove rock in that area completely. The 28 feet, you don't even need to look at that. That suggestion isn't the same at all as excavating an entire site to bring it down to the Broadway elevation of 43. The map street's advantage, so you could look at, is the map street a disadvantage on the site, which obviously could be cured by coming for a GCL 35 waiver, but you can look at that also as an advantage because it eliminates the need for a rear yard and rear yard equivalent within 100 feet of it, which is a large portion of the site. We had asked that the as of right look at a height factor project, which essentially allows the same FAR as the quality housing project and would allow a building that is not encumbered by maximum height limits, would easily sit on pilotis because that's the standard for a height factor building, with a much smaller floor plate covering much less of the lot. This wasn't provided. That's obviously the easiest solution on this lot. The no excavation as of right project that was provided to us is frankly not a serious attempt to persuade, since it leaves intact the entire hill and outcropping, sits the building on top of the 80-foot elevation, filling in the rest of the site to level it to or ramp to 80 feet, and retains the original design of the as of right without modification. It's just plunking the contours of the hill onto the old as of right section, and that's the end of the effort. Hence, they begin the project at the 4th floor, and they use the hill to attempt to demonstrate what a terrible site this is that wrecks the as of right they drew before. That isn't at all how a building is designed to meet site conditions. And I have to say, if that is the conversation the owner wants to have with us about what is permitted as of right on the site, I'm completely through with the application. We have been at this far too long, and I think we should just end it. Next.
I agree with you. I had asked for the height factor alternative, and we didn't get that to indicate how an alternate height factor building could be built on this site. I looked at the alternative that the applicant has provided, and I tried to see how one could take advantage of this site. This site, unlike even the Roscoe Brown site, has its own assets. One is it has 2 street frontages and the grade changes. So using those 2 elements, you really could lay out an as-of-right building, and I did play around with it. And you could have your community facility building in the subcellar area along the frontage of Broadway, which is much more generous than what the applicant was proposing. I was looking at something like 6,500 square foot of community facility space in the subcellar level fronting on Broadway. And then that kind of raises to the elevation, the rock elevation of 60 foot, if you would build a 15-foot high building to provide for your mechanical and other things, and then you can have the parking space on top of it with the entrance from Post Road. And the Post Road entrance is at 66-foot elevation, which slopes down. So you're almost maintaining the existing terrain to bring it down to a parking that is at 60 foot, which is over the community facility space, and it can accommodate the required parking spaces. If you want to do stackers, you can do more.
You're essentially using the community facility as the base.
Right.
To bring it up to some place, come to 60.
Right.
Right, and then you build on top of 60.
Right, and then build it up to the point you can build it to get to the next elevation of the rock, which is at 75 feet or whatever it is, your 10-foot elevation or 15, and then that way you minimize the cut, and yet you have enough horizontal space to be able to build without having to cut the rock and therefore minimize the fill part of it. And then the building sits more at the elevation of 80 foot or so once you work off the floor-to-ceiling heights and other things. And I think you can get units that can take advantage of this sitting over the rock outcrop. There are many ways of treating the site. And the alternative was definitely not an attempt at trying to show an as-of-right building. So until I see an alternative which shows that there is a uniqueness, which I'm still not convinced.
No.
No.
I'm saying I'm not
I think
convinced.
you're being far too generous. I think actually, I have to cut you off and say the two of you were far too generous in that you were providing solutions and suggestions for how this builder could go about building a property. And frankly, it's not your job.
Right.
As of right, it really isn't your job. So, thank you for your generosity. I am not similarly inclined. I have to say.
No, we're talking about as of right project.
Right, and I'm saying you're very generous because you're giving all of these suggestions. It's not our job to give them suggestions as to how they can do it, because believe you, they know.
If this was a good
Okay.
faith application, that might be different. They want what they want, and they don't have an A.
And so I have to say that I looked through their new uniqueness study, and I take issue with a gerrymandered radius diagram. And what I mean by gerrymandered is a diagram that, if left to its own devices, would prove that this site is not unique. And so therefore, what the applicant has done and said, don't include this large parcel to the west because it's a school and it's a large parcel. Don't include any parcels to the east of Broadway because it's on public land. Don't include this, don't include that. And what you have left is a tiny little strip of which we're really unique. But this is Riverdale. Riverdale is built on a major incline. And just about every property in Riverdale is either have a slope through it or is benefiting from the slope on one side or the other side. You walk down the streets and literally the homes to the west are 30 feet, 40 feet up in the air, and the homes to the right are at grade. And the reason why the homes to the right are at grade is because they are at the top of the slope of their lot. And so this applicant actually benefits from having frontage on the top of their slope. so they don't have to do anything but literally slap some kind of a slab on there, support the slab on piers, and build upwards. And then if you can't use all of your FAR, then maybe you come in and you say, oh, we need a little issue, rearranging, and here I am, I'm being generous, and I shouldn't be. But I'm about to go, so to say basically, I'm not convinced at all by A. But should I think to myself, okay, let's just take their arguments and agree with every single thing they say, everything. And I go to the financial report and I see that the financial report, if I believe everything they say, is still being driven by an astronomical site value that doesn't have any basis in reality at all. I said last time at the hearing that I didn't think that there was anything in Riverdale that sold for the acquisition costs that they put on that paper. And I said, if you want to use that acquisition cost, you have to support it by showing me that there's something that's sold in Riverdale at that price point. I got nothing. Could be that they were trying to save money on their financial report, waiting to see if we bought the A. But I have to say, if they just adjusted that acquisition cost down, even their as of right would work if I bought everything and didn't question anything else. And so therefore, to me, there's no A, there's no B, there's no case. This has been open way too long. I'm jumping at the chance to vote on this.
Okay.
Well said. Okay, if what you said last hearing has been ignored, don't be sad. Same here. So, yes, I talk on this project from two perspectives. The previous as of right that was submitted back in February, and the current proposed. And the last time we hear
It's
this
a current
project,
as of right.
the current proposed and as of right, both. Yes, I'm sorry, yes, the current as of right.
They didn't change
Yes,
the proposed
yes,
from
yes,
last time. It's
yes,
only the as of
yes,
right.
I'm sorry. So for the previous as of right, I looked at the hardship was driven by mainly the rock excavation and the SOA. And when you see something like that, the first cost item you look at is the rock excavation. And when I did last hearing, I noticed that it was an error in the spreadsheet that was submitted to us in the calculation of the rock excavation. The person who calculated this, he got the quantity in cubic feet. He put them in the spreadsheet, and he took the quantity in cubic feet and dropped them in the cost analysis, in the cost estimate, as if they were in cubic yards. And that was a mistake. And I already spoke about this last hearing, and I said, please correct it. I haven't seen anything addressing this in this submission. Probably because they submitted a brand new cost analysis. But if you correct the rock mass excavation in the last submission, if you simply take the rock quantity and divide this by 27, which is the relation between the cubic yard and cubic feet, 1 cubic yard is 27 cubic feet. So if you correct this error, the rock excavation will drop significantly, and it will drop by over $4 million. This is item 1. Item 2, and I'm really losing my patience here because this is like the 10th time I talk about this, and not just in this case, but in other cases as well. The concrete for the superstructure. Again, I assume this is a flat plate project. For flat plate, if you take 1 square foot and get the amount of concrete in this 1 square foot and get the cost per that 1 square foot, which is the methodology used in this cost analysis, the cost for the superstructure concrete could be on the order of $20 to $25. Actually, I got several submissions from other applicants, and the cost for a flat plate per square foot was less than $25. And some of them even were like less than 20. The cost, the unit price used in this project is $58 per square foot. And I said, correct this, and if you correct this, the total was about $8 million for that item. So if, let's say we cut the price into half, I'm not gonna say even cut 60%. This is another $4 million reduction. If you add this to the rock cost reduction, you have reduction of total $8 million. The previous as of right, the February as of right was unfeasible. It yielded negative return of about 4.9 million, 5 million, let's say. So if you actually correct these two items only, it's gonna flip the as of right into a positive yield of about 3 million. Add to this the site value issue, conclusion is the previous as of right is feasible, done. Let's move forward. This is one thing. The other thing, and this is, I initially thought that it's useless to talk about this, but again, I want to talk about this because I'm 2 years at the board now, and I have seen like miserable submissions, and this need to stop. Please, respect us. Whoever submit to this board, respect us. When you configure a building to avoid rock excavation, you don't have to put it on top of the hill, like the first floor is the fourth floor, and it's at elevation 72. And this may look weird, but guess what? It's not for us, for an engineer or an architect, it may look weird. But for the guy who prepared the cost estimate, it's not. You know why? Because he played this again. He took out some cost and he needed to put them back. And where from to get them? Oh, let's add some retaining walls. Let's add some backfill. That's why the top slab was put as a slab on grade at elevation 72, and everything below 72 was backfilled. By placing this fill, it's money. So in order to backfill, you need to put money in the cost estimate. You need to put money for the inspection, you need to put money for the fill material, and guess what? You need to retain this huge height of fill, probably 15, 17 feet in some locations. So you need to add 18-inch thick retaining wall to the equation. That's how you balance the cost reduction that the BSA called for. Please stop that. And again, I plead, let's close and vote.
Yeah.
We don't need to do anything else on this project.
Agreed. Commissioner Shibata?
Well, I'm glad to hear that I wish the board would tell how they really feel about this. I don't believe the application meets the findings, nor can I say there was a good faith attempt to meet the findings. I think it's unapologetically egregious ask, and I'm prepared to vote and close tomorrow. I don't think the board should allow any more time on this.
I agree.
Agreed.
So, having heard, broadcasting now to the applicant and representatives, unanimous agreement on this for different reasons, which I think is very important. Each commissioner has a different reason for thinking that the application has not made the findings. I would recommend that rather we go than going to a hearing tomorrow, that the applicant withdraw the application. Otherwise, we end up having to have a hearing and listen to testimony, which we know will be significant from neighbors who may not have been aware of what the board said today, and it would just save everyone a lot of time and pain.
Right, and please don't come in trying to convince us because we have no more questions. The board is finished with this case.
Okay. Item number 16, 2018-3BZ, 154-160 West 124th Street, Manhattan. This application's been withdrawn. Item number 17, 2018-59BZ, 3030 Northern Boulevard, Queens. It's a legalization of a PCE.
What did you just say?
A legalization of a PCE.
Wait a minute, this is
3030 North
this is
Boulevard.
not, this is, you're right, but this isn't the first Out hearing, right, okay. So applicant continues to argue that it's okay to egress through a room that will be littered with weights, steps, and balls. I just have to say, sorry, no. And if the applicant's representative doesn't know what we mean, I suggest that he or she actually go to a gym and see what an aerobics room looks like mid-class, because there's no way that that's a safe means of egress. I looked for an alternative place to put a door, and there is actually, so, you know, the weightlifting area, it may sound funny that you can say, okay, put it in the weightlifting area, but that's all fixed equipment. So the weightlifting area actually has a devising wall that leads to a corridor, which is really actually closer to the staircase than the exit that's going to the aerobic studio. So rather than drag this on, they just need to move it. The acoustical information that was provided in the letter also should be shown on the plan, since we have time to put it on the plans. And those are my comments. Any other?
There was no comments regarding the, no feedback regarding the vibration issue. Last time we said if you can get us something from the structure engineer, because they are counting on the rigidity of the building. So we said if you can have an engineer look at the building and say that the vibrations would not be an issue, and I see no feedback on that.
So I think one of the reasons was that we did they had posted the lobby of the building, and because we didn't get any complaints, it seems as if the acoustical isolation is working. Otherwise, I mean, that's the whole idea of posting.
And it's going to be conditioned either way on
Yes,
the,
exactly.
okay, I'm fine.
Item number 16, 2018-168BZ, 1769 East 26th Street, Brooklyn.
All right. Wasn't ready. Sorry, just a second. The last submission had some inconsistencies that needed to be corrected before proceeding. The BSA zoning calculation sheet and drawing P-01 and P-01.1 still don't match internally or with one another as to the proposed floor area. That was the specific comment at the last hearing. The designation on the floor plan should make clear that the floor area is zoning floor area and not gross. The architect kind of mixes those two terms up, and that can be problematic for DOB. If it is gross, then deductions need to be shown, because it seems like they might be reducing the amount of the gross by deductions, and they're not showing what they are. The attic and rear roof line has since been modified and the rear balcony removed. Since the issue was to have less impact on the neighbors at the side and rear, I asked why in the attic area where there is no occupiable floor, does the roof line look the same as the front of the building? They should drop the roof line at the back down to where it's shown in section as being not occupiable space. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will become occupiable space, which we've seen done. So again, I want the owner and the architect present tomorrow, or we adjourn.
Anyone else? That's good.
Yeah.
Item number 19, 2018-191BZ, 215 North 10th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, as requested, the demand studies were done based on a potential medical office use, and it found a demand for 61 spaces. The applicant then assumed, but I'm commenting later on this, that the 67 spaces proposed to be provided, 16 of which are for residential use, can supply the shortfall in the demand. Ordinarily, we look to ensure that demand for the specific use is met on site. So according to really a cursory reading of the study provided, 61 spaces for the office use and 16 spaces for residential should be provided. I note, however, when looking closer at that study, and I think this is really different from the other cases we see when that's the situation, that it's actually the residential use that is generating the vast majority of the demand, averaging 27 to 31 space demand throughout the study period for the residential users, while the office and medical offices generate at most 34 spaces. So if the modal splits and census data are correct, it's the zoning resolution that's off in its requirements as to residential use, not the sort of DOT standards for medical and office use. So therefore, I would be okay with the requested reduction because it doesn't really matter which use you have. It's the residential tenants that are going to arguably overpark in this building. I'm a bit confused, though, by the use of 37,870 gross square feet for the office analysis, as stated in the cover letter, when the prior proposal was a 30,898 square feet in office use. So my question is it the 4,393 square feet of so-called office area in the so-called cellar that's being included in that analysis? I say so-called because this is just one of those opportunities that you use with sort of grade conditions or not conditions and the freeboard issue to be able to say that this level, which is actually not below grade, is a cellar. It's below grade when you look at a section relative to freeboard, but it's got storefront windows. You enter at grade from it. And I just want to remind that retail space is not eligible for a parking reduction. So our resolution will need to be very, very clear that there is no retail space on the site and that the entire commercial use is being designated as office space, use group 6B. I note also that the residential floor area may have increased since the last submission, but there was no increase in unit count. Maybe I didn't understand the purpose of the calculation that's on the drawing. The parking and loading berth zoning analysis on VSA 02 is based on use group 7B, not 6B, so that's incorrect. It needs to be corrected. Also, applicant's parking consultant provided a useful bit of information on needed floor-to-ceiling heights for this type of stacker system. Provided sections for this project don't show what the floor-to-ceiling heights are in the parking areas, but a floor plan was provided, added to the drawing set that shows the areas where there are 11'3" clear ceiling heights. This system appears to be relying on parking overhead the travel aisle that's located between the stackers. I wasn't aware of this until they just revised the drawings because the last set of drawings were very kind of unclear and a little soupy. We have another application like this that we are currently hearing, and I'm not sure that fire department was pleased with the idea. It means that people are working and driving underneath kind of another tier of parking, and even the operational plan explains that they'll put cars first up there because that's an area that'll be easiest to get to, and then they'll move them to another place. So you've got workers walking underneath parked cars all the time, and I don't know what fire department has to say about that. The operational plan doesn't diagram the parking areas described in it, and it really should. For example, it doesn't explain, though I'm surmising, where the, quote, lifts over the central valet maneuvering area are, but I think that's the aisle that I'm talking about. And we still have open WRP coastal analysis.
No, they submitted.
Yeah, the applicant was working with city planning, and they just made a submission. We anticipate they might get a sign off by tomorrow.
Okay. So we need fire department to look into this. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, what are you? Yeah, the model split or the split, the auto share, I was like somewhat concerned about the number that is utilized. If you look at page 125 of the study, if you can put the number in the PDF directly, 125.
In the EAS?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's gonna take you to the medical office trip generation, and there is a table there in which the auto share is indicated as 24%. So that was the number that's being utilized in the calculations. If you go to page 133, I guess, what, 131, hold on one second, 131.
131?
Yeah, these are the transportation parameters that are recommended to be used. And if you look at the medical office auto share, it says it's 44%. All the other figures are consistent with that table except for the 24% number. So I'm not sure, was there a reason for that, or this is just a mistake in the calculations? If you fix that number, the 24% on page 125 to 44%, that would result in increasing the number of trips that's gonna be parked, and I believe the demand figures would be significantly increased.
I think they were arguing for a lower auto share because of the proximity of the two subway lines.
Yeah.
And that's what they had stated in the narrative part of that report.
Right, so they used, I believe this was East New York, they used as their EIS source, right? Where it's much less well-served by transportation. And so they adjusted for being a block away from two
But I
different subway
haven't
lines.
seen any kind of survey or any kind of study that they did, like actual measurements at a similar facility. So I'm not sure what is the basis for that 24% number? Why it's not 20, why it's not 30?
Right, it could be, I don't have it in front of me to check, but it could be that they're using also census tract data on reverse journey to work, which also drives that. So we can look ourselves, but we can just have them respond to this question, okay?
Yeah, if they provide like explanation or justification for using the 24 versus the 44, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Anything else? Item number 20, 2019-23BZ, 290 Mulberry Street, Manhattan.
Okay, we just needed the drawings corrected to show that the toilet rooms in the cellar were included in the total calculations and the plans, and that was done.
It's done? You should say it was done. Item number 21, 2019-163BZ, 678 Broadway, Manhattan.
An ADA accessibility sign and buzzer were added to the front door of the building as we requested, and they provided a photo.
And also they confirmed that the distance as indicated on the plans is correct, but I did scale the drawing and look at it. The number shown in the drawing is like 15 to 20 feet less than that. The correct number based on scaling the drawing is 115. I'm not sure if this is okay or not.
Yeah,
I'm
you
not
have-
saying.
right.
Yeah, I'm not saying that if it's 115, it's not good. I'm not saying that, but
okay.
I'm just saying that the number is not whatever is shown on the drawing, it's 115 or more.
Okay, so the rule is either 150 feet to the exit or 200, depending on whether the full building is sprinklered or only the space is sprinklered. So they're under both.
The maximum is 150.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
or even 200, depending on what's the situation in the
So
building.
even if it's 115, it's good?
Yeah.
Okay, so
New cases, item number 1, 2019-60BZ, 13202 89th Avenue, Queens.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials, but I did not find proof of notice of hearing. Community Board recommends approval. There are no specific findings for a 7350 special permit to allow side yard waivers. So it's whatever we kind of look at, in terms of impact on the neighborhood. Footnote 1 in the statement of facts, I just didn't understand it. They need to explain it. Why would the front yard be increased if this is to legalize the side yard encroachment? I think that might have been a flying sentence from another application or something. I just didn't understand what the footnote is about. I also don't understand why our approval results in a floor area increase. I thought this is a legalization of an existing condition, so the total existing floor area on the lot is 28,464 square feet. Maybe what it is an imprecise use of language. Maybe what they're saying is, absent this legalization, we'd have this much, and with the legalization, we'd have that much. But there's like a inconsistent use of floor area in the discussion.
and it's a basement as well, I guess.
What, sorry?
It sounds like it's a basement. If you look at the cross-section they provided, it's kind of below grade.
I think it's on the ground floor.
I thought it was at
On the
a
ground floor, it's a
grade
one-story
level.
at grade,
It's a warehouse building,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, but the encroachment,
It's
I-
a little lean-to. That's one of my concerns.
No, it's,
They excavated a little bit for a foundation or something like that, and they're showing a section through their foundation. This is just that little lean-to added to the side of an existing manufacturing building.
if you look at page 7, there is no number for the drawing, actually. That section and elevation, this one?
right.
Yeah, so it's not a basement, it's more like their little foundation for this lean-to.
You mean that
Yeah.
the grade is, that finished floor is here?
Yeah, so it's,
Especially if you look at the floor plan, there isn't any stair that's
Right.
leading.
There is a staircase,
Or
actually.
the main entrance is at grade from the street level.
yeah.
And then the staircase is only to lead up to the existing building, which is at a higher elevation than the extension.
Okay, we can get them
We can
to
ask them.
explain it,
Okay.
but, also, this is an application to legalize an obstruction in the required 15-foot side yard. But I do have to say, in exchange, we can direct the applicant to clean up the site so as to be more respectful of its adjacent residential neighbors. There is razor wire rolling down the roof that should be removed. And those fences that are in such disrepair and disarray should be removed and reconstructed. It's kind of a really messy site. Once you come here, we get to ask you to clean things up. I also ask whether the structure to be legalized meets building and fire codes, as it actually looks more like a temporary metal lean-to. I mean, the section shows it actually has a foundation, but when you look at it, it really looks like, just some corrugated metal that was nailed together. So it needs to meet codes. That's just one. Anybody else?
The building has 4 parts to it, and the couple of those buildings that are located in the rear are already encroaching the the side yard requirement. This addition is kind of continuing with that, which is what is before us. And I had similar question, which is this metal shed, what is it being used for, and is it fire rated? Does it have all the necessary safety measured given its proximity? Other structures are much more solidly built compared to this one, so I do have that question.
Are you going to reconcile the square footages of all the buildings on the site? Because when you add it up, it doesn't seem to add up to their 28,464. Like it's way off, almost as if they are not including part of the main building. I think it says 10,891 square feet, but it's really like 16,000 square feet. And they're leaving something out, and also it'd be helpful if they clarify the use of this side building so that we are sure it's not too much of an intrusion on the neighbor.
Yeah, and I had similar question to that effect. Is that noise attenuation? I mean, depending on the use of it, and if it's a metal shed, what kind of noise it's going to generate and whether it will affect. And is there any emission that is coming out of the building? So it's the air quality issue. Are there any mechanical vents or HVAC structures on the roof? I mean, from the elevation, it seems there isn't, but we need confirmation on those as to how this building is being vented, what it's being used for, and thereby the air quality and the noise. Good. Okay.
I didn't find any plans of the original, how this condition would be without the encroachment. Was that submitted?
No. It would just not have that thing. But we don't know what that thing is doing. Is it a storage shed, or does it open to the adjoining building, which doesn't, it may have a door in it.
Apparently, it has an access to the staircase in the back of the building, but it doesn't, I don't see a direct access from the warehouse
Right.
Yeah.
to that encroachment.
The applicant said that this is being used by some footwear manufacturing. It wasn't clear whether it's only this metal shed that is being used or it's the entire building. That wasn't.
And I'm not sure if we need to, have opinion from fire department, because we are talking about 3 means of egress. One of them, two of them are very adjacent to each other, so practically, they are not 2, they are 1. So you have one to the staircase, and then if you look at the page 4, the plan view of the existing warehouse, number 1, you have 2 exitways to the street, and then the other means of egress is to the staircase at the top. So I'm not sure if this is okay.
You're not sure if it's okay to egress?
From the fire code perspective.
Because the
There's
staircase,
one staircase that's leading into the building, and then.
then you go,
And there's one exit. It's true.
okay. And then the other is about the construction materials. As Commissioner Shada said, it needs to have proper fire rating.
Yeah, and I'm asking them if they can provide us with some photos for the interior, just to see how it looks, and clarifying the finished floor for that encroachment. I also believe that the tenant chart on page 4 of the statement of fact is not accurate, or maybe there are 2 statements, one on page 4 in the tenant chart and one on page 3 that describe the warehouse building. So I would take a look at them, because I believe there is a contradiction, inconsistency between these 2 statements in describing the use of the building. And when they say that the encroachment is not gonna impact the adjacent properties because they already have yards, and based on the existing zoning, they believe that any building next to that encroachment will have a yard, so it would have light and air. But I'm concerned if the zoning changes for the properties next door, could it be an impact on these properties in the future?
So I think that the issue is, these are residential, it's really a residential district with individual houses adjacent, and this is an odd situation of a very low-density residential district up against a manufacturing district. It's kind of a rare combination,
railroad.
right? And if you look at the zoning map, it's an isolated, this is really a little bit of an island in the middle of all this residential. So but in terms of, as long as it's a residential district that it adjoins, there'll always be a 30-foot rear yard requirement,
Yes.
right? And what's typical in most of these residence districts with single-family homes, there's a garage. And so what you're seeing on the site plan there is a garage up against the property line, all the way down the line, so that this little extension is backing up to garages, and it's not taller than the garages.
And these lots that are abutting the manufacturing, they're typically, lots tend to be 100 feet deep. These are much deeper, they're more than 100.
So the size of the yard would be...
It's,
Yeah, they're
yes.
110.
Right, and I mean, there is a pocket of manufacturing behind all of these residential building because there is an LIR railroad track. And so along these LIR track, there were all these manufacturing uses. So one of these manufacturing uses happens to fall on one side of the railroad track, which is what we are dealing with. Rest of
Yeah.
it's on the other side, which is more manufacturing and separated by residential by a street, whereas this one is abutting on the rear yard.
And in addition, they indicated that the floor area is not going to be increased. I totally understand this. So the floor area as a zoning parameter is not going to be impacted. But how about the other zoning parameters like lot coverage, open space? Are there any requirements? They should have like...
They should be clear, but
Yeah.
in manufacturing, there isn't an open space
Okay.
requirement.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's on the chart, actually. The BSA chart covers
BSA
that.
chart covers that.
Okay.
Item number 2, 2019, I'm sorry.
No, I just want to say there isn't any requirement. The zoning chart shows that.
Oh, okay.
For lot coverage.
For lot
or
coverage and open space.
Okay.
Now I can go? Okay. Item number 2, 2019-77BZ, 1134 Fulton Street, Brooklyn. Is that PCE?
Yeah, so I didn't find really any of the things we're supposed to have. I need proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, service of initial application, community board recommendation, DOI, fire department. Nothing was in the folder. Unless there was, and I didn't find it.
No.
I didn't find it either.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I'll take care of that then.
Okay.
Because he's out today, okay.
The drawings submitted are also nearly illegible in PDF form, so they need to resubmit. This is the strange thing that happens where they're all soupy and you can barely see the numbers. I don't understand what the process is that makes the PDF so soupy. Egress, they need to show the egress path dimensioned to show compliance with code. The path should show to which fire stair travel should go, and the first floor plan must show stair and egress to the street. The floor plan indicates the building is 8 stories. The statement of fact says it's 10. One of those is the right answer. There isn't much in the way of acoustical separation within the PCE space. Hopefully, its separation from residential by 2 intervening floors will be enough. There's a parking garage in between, so arguably that's the ultimate in vapor barrier, or like whatever airspace that you use. You know? Anybody else?
Yeah, actually, the statement of facts contradicts the drawings, and the drawings actually contradicts themselves.
Yep.
So the drawings on 104, BSA 104, says cellar plus 9, but if you look at the plot plan, it says cellar plus 8. So even within the drawings, they are inconsistent.
Okay.
Move on? Item number 3, 2019 88BZ, 31-57 31st Street, Queens. It's a PCE.
Yeah, it's a legalization, I'd like to know when it opened. We have proof of service of initial application to officials. I didn't find proof of notice of hearing. We have proof of posting in the lobby. I'm a little concerned that this applicant thinks that posting in the lobby is the same as notice of hearing. It's not. The community board recommendation also don't have. Or if
Community
we-
board voted 31 to
Okay.
0 to approve.
Okay, thanks. We have 2 letters in support. We have DOI, we need fire department, please. This is the type of facility about which we often have complaints from neighbors because of the use of treadmills, bikes, and weights. There are acoustical details provided, and the lobby was posted with so far no letters in opposition, but maybe we'll see tomorrow. Anyone else?
Item number 4, 2019-159BZ, 249 Church Street, Manhattan. This is also a PCE.
And a legalization, they opened in March of this year.
All right, I'll put those,
Um,
I'll change the lineup too.
Yeah, we need, I didn't find proof of notice of hearing again. We do have proof of service of initial application to officials. We do have proof of posting in the lobby. So again, I'm concerned that the posting in the lobby is supplanted in proper notice. It shouldn't. Community board recommends approval. We have DOI, there is a massage room, we need massage licenses. There appear to be, in terms of ADA access, 2 separate elevators in the space. I just want to make sure that that's a correct observation. They don't both seem to service all the floors. One seems not to continue to the first floor, and one seems to stop at the cellar, but not at the subcellar. So maybe that's why there are 2 elevators, one to pick up where the other one leaves off, if they could explain. And we need fire department. Anybody else?
Yeah, so I had the similar question with regards to entrance. So you're referring to when you enter from Leonard, there is an elevator, but it's not clear whether it's an opening at that level of the lobby or one has to take the stair up to take the elevator.
okay.
That, it wasn't clear from the drawings. Sometimes, elevators have this half opening.
Right.
So I would like the applicant to clarify.
Move on.
Yeah.
Item number 5, 2019-167BZ, 2467 Jerome Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, we have proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, and proof of service of initial application to officials. We need the community board recommendation.
Community board has waived.
Yeah.
Oh, they waived?
sent you
This
Okay.
morning.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
they
have
said they
one-
had no issues with this one.
Okay, we have one, well, did they vote or they waived?
Waived.
Okay, that's different than saying they have no issue.
Well-
We have one letter in support. According to the gym's website, the location hasn't opened yet. The building is oddly subdivided by a district boundary of a C14 where you can't have a PCE permit. The plans show a wall to be constructed at the corner of the PCE to disallow the use there. I'm like, okay, it'll be at the very least a closet, but it
I
doesn't
know,
show
it's
it.
shading.
Yeah, it doesn't show it as a closet, it shows it as a wall, but what can you say? There is only one means of egress that I can find from a 17,550 square foot space with an occupant load of 288 persons. No way that's allowed. They need to show the proper and adequate egress. They have to show how it works actually, right? So it's on the first and second floor, really the second floor. So you need to show how it's egressing down to the first floor and out to the street. We do have DOI and we need fire department. Anybody else? Okay.
Item number 6, 2019-184BZ, 45-20 83rd Street and 80-52 47th Street, Queens. This is the Renaissance Charter School.
Yes. Okay. We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. I didn't see this community board recommendation. Is there one? There's an error in the address on our calendar. It should be 47th Avenue, not 47th, I think it's the street. Okay, I'd like to understand what the statement of facts means by stating in the central curriculum of the school is the, quote, study of New York. I think this might be a typo. I don't know if it's relevant to the accreditation program. It's nice that they study New York, but that wouldn't cover it. Well, maybe it would. Maybe through the study of New York, you do math, science, literature. I mean, you could. The statement of facts verifies that the school does meet the 1210 school definition minimum curriculum standards, and that the site is within 400 feet of a district in which the use is permitted as of right. In fact, this lot is an isolated M11 surrounded on 5 sides, which is hard to do, by C and R districts. A letter was provided by the school director describing the search for potential sites in as-of-right areas. I personally was persuaded that the search was concerted and that the reasons for not selecting the as-of-right locations acceptable. I'd like to know if the zoning map amendment application has been filed with city planning. I didn't find it on their ZAP portal. The reason for asking is apparently they're applying simultaneously for a zoning map change, which would render this an as-of-right use. I see noise criteria for the impact of the third-floor play roof on adjacent residential uses and the proposed attenuation, and of the 28 dBA window wall attenuation. But what about the impact of the Long Island Railroad on the children at play on the main roof and the third-floor play roof? So it's one thing to have a window wall attenuation, but the kids are, opposite the tracks. And what about air quality also for outdoor play? As we know, railroads produce PCBs and all sorts of exciting things, right? So I'd like to make sure that that's included. I don't know. Tracy's not here anymore.
So they still have an open hazmat, and it's still DOT for air quality and noise.
Right, but so this is an additional,
Oh, okay.
I don't think this was reviewed. So I don't think their DEP is reviewing this from the point of view of children playing on the roof and their exposure to noise and air quality.
Okay.
Because all that was recommended by the EAS was a closed window condition, which doesn't work on a playground, right?
I hear you, okay.
Okay,
I'll mention
so
that.
they should provide also the other 2 elevations and show materials, and just a reminder, no exterior insulating foam material. The applicant provided a very thorough school safety analysis. It was really excellent, actually. If we could have a standard, I'd like that to be the standard, but it's really DOT's domain. While DOT continues to review, my only concern is that the no parking zone reserved for school buses will interfere with the operations of the current or future commercial uses across 83rd Street. Though it's understood that no such activity was observed on site visit days, but nonetheless, even DOT said that they don't usually allow the standing zones to be in front of somebody else's property, and here it's in front of somebody else's property. And so I'm wondering why, and I understand there's this turning radius that they showed for the fire department and so on, but maybe they could either move the school buses to in front of the Long Island Railroad, where you're not really in front of anyone else's property that would use it for parking, and then move the parent drop-off area to some of those places where the cars are not affected by the turning radius of the fire department. There were little spots where you could do it, so maybe there's a way to do that. School safety had comments on October 2nd that the applicant needs to address. DEP had August comments on hazmat, noise, and air quality. A phase 2 and a HASP is required, to which the applicant responded in October. I don't know whether the site's been accepted for an E designation that was proposed. We do have LPC, archaeological, and also park shadows sign off, or I'm not sure who does the sign off. We do need DEP sign off on noise, hazmat's air quality, and the school safety sign off.
Right.
Anybody else on this one? No?
Yeah, I don't know why they want to start with part of the site and then like as a temporary portion and then move to the other part. And first of all, I have a question. Are they keeping the temporary portion? Are they adding both? It appears
say
no,
the answer is no, based on the plans that they
Right,
submitted.
so what they said, and that's why the zoning analysis is interesting because, or the zoning amendment, because they're proposing temporarily, they will use the lower portion as a temporary one until the new construction happens. And once the new construction happens, that temporary space will revert back to being used for as of right.
That's what they say.
So not school, but it would be whatever the underlying zoning would allow.
That's
So-
what they say, but school
Right.
safety had a similar question, and it's a fair question, because now you've spent all this money renovating that side of the building, and arguably the classroom, your school's gonna do really well, and kids are gonna wanna come, so maybe the argument would be they're gonna come back here for an amendment because they'd like to keep more kids, right? But the entrances are dealing with different things, right? And I actually liked very much how they were handling the entrance for the temporary, because you have that little private parking arrival zone, so everyone can come in there, and you're really disturbing the businesses, the residences less, right? But, so even if it were ultimately permanent, the schools could be entered from two sides. Like, you could actually arguably have like the lower school entered from that side and the upper school entered from the other side. It could actually make for a much better solution. On the other hand, I get that they're designing this, new state-of-the-art building, and they wouldn't want this kind of thrown together section on the other side to be connected to their state-of-the-art building. However, if they threw it together, they could always move the kids out, they'd stage it, move the kids out, make that lower portion state-of-the-art, and then move those kids in. So I'm kind of looking at it as an expectation that they're going to either come back to us for an
That's what I'm
amendment,
asking,
or it won't matter anyway, because they're going for a
Zoning change.
rezoning.
Right.
And so then they're gone, they relinquish the special permit, because all we're doing is allowing a use, and the use will become as of right.
And maybe
in
it'll
a year.
become a future incubation site for other charter schools, which is kind of becoming the trend.
Yes, yeah. That's a business unto itself,
Yeah.
yeah. So in a certain way, it doesn't matter to us as long as the zoning proceeds, which is one reason, the rezoning, which is one reason where I'd like to understand where they are, because it doesn't show up yet on ZAP, so it's really in its early stages.
The other thing is actually the thing that you talk about is the noise from it's the opposite for the typical that we usually ask for, the noise from kids to the neighbors. But in this case, it's the noise from the railroad to the kids, but not just the noise. I have built a school, it's very similar to this, probably 1995. And the vibrations from the railroad is really significant, and I would commend them to pay attention to this. It's like you're placing a structure in a seismic, very actively seismic zone. Every an hour or so, you're gonna have a big train passing by, and it's
More frequently than that.
Yes, if the structure engineer doesn't pay attention to this, it's gonna be a problem.
Yeah. So I do have to say, this is an extremely experienced architecture firm, and we had another BSA action where it was a school in that same kind of proximity to the railroad. It wasn't under us, maybe under Commissioner Otley Brown, but it's It's a pretty surprising site. You're so close to the railroad, and the school's really well designed, so you're not aware at all as the trains are passing. But they don't have any outdoor play area. That's why I was surprised to see that here.
Yeah, I've seen some inconsistency in the elevation views for the temporary scheme. The school safety should include the temporary construction adjacent to the temporary school. When you
say that
have,
again?
when you start the temporary portion of the school, you can have a construction site next door, and I believe it's gonna be a significant construction activities going on, foundation, superstructure, so that should be accounted for in the school safety for the temporary portion.
So school safety looks at Department of Transportation, that's who they are, right? So if you're talking about sort of the conflict between like construction trucks.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking
Yes.
about?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so that's fair, okay.
But they'll be on the other side of the building, on
They
the
will.
other block. And there's no way to get from the block that has the temporary school to the other block.
Yes, it seems not, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if there'll be an impact other than in general traffic conditions, but, which is, we're not looking at, well, I don't know. It is subject to an EAS, right? So construction impacts are part of the findings of an EAS. So if
If it rises to-
if DEP is looking at construction impacts and DOT is aware of the construction and how that'll affect, I think it's a fair question, even though I don't see how it'll affect where the school buses park because of that really great driveway that they have there. I mean, that's really ideal for a school. In fact, what's the zoning district that requires that you have a drive up for schools? That's like Ocean Parkway Special District or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next one? Item number 7, 2019-27BZ, 4533 18th Avenue, Brooklyn, House of Worship.
Okay. Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and perhaps also to neighbors, so it wasn't required because that's proof of initial, but I think they may have done that. We have proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community board recommends approval. We have one letter in support. So I have a little trouble with this application. I take real exception to the statement in the statement of facts that the congregation has suffered a hardship for at least the last 10 years because it has illegally occupied a residential building as a community facility contrary to fire code, building code, and zoning regulations, which DOB sought to enforce by issuing violations and vacate orders. They're saying, we're suffering a hardship because we're illegal and they keep hitting us with fines. That's terrible. Have pity on us. I'm sorry, I'm not making the connection between hardship and them being scofflaws. It's just not working for me. Not to mention the vacate orders, those are done because people are at risk, right? It's a safety situation. Construction without permits, illegal occupancy, and its continuation in flagrant disregard for the law is not a hardship. It is merely immoral, and that's where I say it now. It's immoral and unacceptable behavior on the part of building management and ownership. There's no excuse for such behavior, and I am not sympathetic. The most recent violation was issued in April of this year, the first of 28 violations for this illegal use in 2009. It started in 2009 as far as DOB knows. It's probably a lot older than that. It is not as if ownership can claim it was unaware of the situation and of their obligation to comply with the law. The board will not act until all fines are paid in full. The ECB fines add up to about $50,000. You should have thought of that before you occupied illegally if you don't like the idea of paying violations. There is a 2017 partial vacate order citing inadequate means of egress. Fire department, please inspect. This is a very strangely worded statement of facts, especially in light of the experience of this applicant in appearing before this board. I'm talking about the applicant, right? If the community facility is legitimately, when I say applicant, I mean the counsel for applicant. If the community facility is legitimately a house of worship, then the Cornell Doctrine would apply here. So please consult other applications where this argument is made and incorporate it in the statement. I get the feeling that the person who wrote this works for the people who regularly appear here, and that the work was not checked by someone experienced, and so it was kind of a haphazard attempt to file an application instead of looking at a prior application for
I
guidance.
still don't think it's an excuse.
No, it's not an excuse. I'm just saying, it's pretty surprising.
It's got to be completely restructured.
Yes.
Basically.
Right,
Right.
I agree.
Similarly, the request to waive parking must be supported by the analysis used to demonstrate satisfaction of the findings for city planning's section 25-35 House of Worship parking waiver certification. And again, please, whoever preparing this application, ask the person who owns your company to show you how to do this, because I don't think we should need to instruct a beginner from a law firm that has enormous amount of experience appearing before this board. It takes a lot of time on the part of staff, and there's no reason why it should. They need to clarify hours on the statement of facts. There is conflicting information for Saturday. The architect is incorrect that the drawing should be reflecting an existing condition. To legalize this work at Department of Buildings, the drawings need to reflect what the conditions were prior to the illegal work and what the proposed conditions are, as if they were to be constructed today. That's how you do a legalization, so I'm confused about why the architect doesn't know this. That will trigger the need to comply with 2014, not 1968 or 1938 building code. That means street tree planting and so on. Street trees was what drew my attention to the idea that they were trying to get this under 1968 building code, but there's a gigantic existing tree in front of the house, so I doubt they actually need to provide a new street tree unless that's a program DOT is pursuing. It's a very nice old, maybe a plane tree. This is a change in use and occupancy plus an enlargement. Drawings and Z-001 should clarify what is an existing non-compliant condition prior to the illegal work, such as that this is a semi-detached house to be converted to a house of worship. That doesn't mean you don't need waivers, because DOB says, oh, you're moved to another chapter in the zoning resolution, so you have to comply with everything that applies to a community facility, including building code, all the current codes. I'd like them to clarify what is meant on the zoning calculation page Z-001 by quote perimeter wall and quote proposed perimeter to be removed. I think they don't know what a perimeter wall is. A perimeter wall refers to the height in this district. It's
The street wall height.
It's the street wall height, right? And unless they're also trying to show that they have adequate perimeter street frontage to comply with frontage requirements, which is a building code requirement, right? But the architect seems quite confused by that and repeated it a few times on the zoning calculation chart. Designation on the site plan that this is a 3-story brick building doesn't comport with cellar plus 2-story floor plans, so get it right. They need to provide a preliminary firm map. The drawings show a firm from 2007. They need an analysis, and this is something I always require when we're talking about converting a house, which is designed for a family of, 5, 6 plus parties with teenagers, and not a house of worship with hundreds of people standing on the floor. So we need an analysis by a structural engineer that the building can support the live loads for an occupancy of 125 persons, And I'd have to say that, given that we know that some structural engineers will write and sign anything, I'd like it to actually be calculations, and therefore, we have an engineer who can review those calculations, and so we can see whether it's believable, and include it with give it to DOB. They need to verify that the 2014 building code allows you to calculate the rated occupancy based on 1968 codes. I don't think so. I think rated occupancy is 1 per 7 square feet, not 1 per 10 square feet for assembly spaces without fixed seating, in which case the rated occupancy is actually 179 persons. I think the parking calculations for rated capacity are also incorrect on the DOB determination. It should be based on rated capacity of 179 divided by 15 or 12 parking spaces. It's waived if there are less than 10 spaces. Or if the rated capacity was properly calculated, then there's no need for a BSA waiver because you would end up with 8 required spaces. But it seems to me you have to use the 2014 code. A 14-foot 7-inch rear yard is a permitted obstruction at 1 story and under 23 feet high, so they don't need a rear yard waiver. I didn't find a single ADA access or an ADA toilet, both of which, the absence of which is illegal. There's also a coat rack in front of the means of access and egress. Makes it more convenient to hang your coat, but then you can't get out in a fire. And they need to show on the first floor plan of the first floor versus the grade elevation. Show on the first floor plan elevation, the level of the first floor versus the grade elevation at the front, rear, and side. So I just don't know how high the first floor is relative to grade. So they need to show those heights on the floor plans. Doors swing in the opposite direction of egress. I hope that's not actually the case in real life, but fire department's inspection will reveal that. Cellar section shows a 6-foot 8-inch ceiling height. I don't think that's permitted by code for any occupancy, but I could be wrong. The front yard should be planted pursuant to section 23-451. To comport with neighborhood character. They need to provide fencing and planting in front, side, and rear yards, and tell us what it is. It should be metal picket fence. And they need to provide an interior trash storage facility. And that's the end of my comments for the moment.
So,
I just have a couple
Go
of
ahead.
things to add. In the application, in the uniqueness section, the document says that the site is irregular. And this is a 22-foot wide, 115-foot long rectangular lot, so it's not at all irregular. So they need to revise that statement. I had similar question regarding, I needed more information about the program, clarity on the hours of operation, and the parking waiver analysis.
So I think their uniqueness has to justify why an as of right, which would mean cutting this building back to provide the required side yards and the parking, would not work for their program. Key here is program, and they don't discuss it at all. And then they go on, and this is, this problem goes out throughout all of their findings. For instance, their character finding is simply that we've been using it this way for so long, and it hasn't bothered anybody, so we're good. No, it has to be the impact of not providing side yards or parking on the community. And also, as far as the minimal finding, whether it's the minimum variance, you have 45 congregants, yet you have sanctuary space for 125 people. How is what you're asking for the minimum variance? And it hasn't been addressed at all.
And it's actually maybe 179 people if you work on rated capacity, so. Okay.
I have no additional comments.
Anything else?
I would like to see a much greater detail in a programmatic needs analysis. And I also, there was a mention of a neighbor granting an easement, I don't know what the purpose of that was, and I just wanted to explain that a little more.
I think,
Was it so because of the side yard, he's asking that the
I
easement?
think that was more for egress.
Yeah.
But you're right,
There
we
was
don't
a
have,
reference.
I'd like to know what
yeah.
what they're seeking to resolve with that. Not
Well,
that I
we don't
believe you
grant
can.
easements,
No,
so,
no, I-
yeah, but you're right, I don't know what they were talking about with easement. Okay. And, yeah, okay, thank you.
Move on. Item number 8, 2019-194BZ, 50 Titus Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay, we need proof of initial application to officials, I didn't find that, but we do have proof of service of, notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, and not sure what the community board recommended.
Committee voted 29 approved.
Yeah, 29 in favor, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't mark that, okay. We have 2 letters of objection, one citing the proximity of the proposed house to adjacent properties and to the absence of parking. In fact, though, the proposal provides 2 parking spaces in the side lot ribbon, so I don't think the neighbor was aware of that. They state that the owner states that the lot was owned separately and individually since 1961. They provided a vacant lot study showing that the other 8 similarly sized vacant lots are either owned in conjunction with adjoining lots or are buildable because they're not encumbered by a New York City sewer easement, hence the site is unique. I actually agreed with that. I'd like to know if the site engineer or architect verified with DEP that the sewer easement, which is now almost 100 years old, is still active and in use. I ask because the survey shows both the 10-foot easement area and the notation that the 15-inch sanitary sewer is, quote, abandoned and hydraulically sand-filled, unquote. The variance depends on the lack of right to construct over the sewer easement, and I have had a little bit of experience with courts considering easements to have been abandoned when they're over a certain number of years, like more than 50 or something like that. This is almost 100 years old, and if DEP is no longer using it, then you can no longer say that you can't build on it, which, by the way, would be a great advantage to this property owner to know that they don't have to deal with this easement, and then they could put the house in the right place, right? So that's certainly worth checking.
I don't think that easements, when it's a city easement, when it's a government-owned easement for the benefit of the government, those aren't, the law that provides that most easements that run with property or between private people a court may overrule in a period of time because of the law of perpetuities, that wouldn't apply with a government. But
Right.
again, the city may not need it any longer, so I certainly think that's worth.
Right, so this would be more like reaching out to the DEP and saying, because we actually had another case like that where, I think it's Staten Island, where the site was terribly encumbered by the easement. It was like no place to put this house, right? And so the owner went to DEP and said, please reconsider, like, can I be a little bit on top of the easement? And I think DEP actually allowed a little bit of encumbrance in the easement area, understanding what it was doing to the site, but that was an active easement zone. So
Right,
they
this
were
is the
like,
one.
no way can you go further than maybe 5 feet or something? Whereas
This
in
was in
this,
Queens.
right, that was in Queens? Yeah, you remember that one? That was Sandy's case, yeah. So I didn't find anything, and I can't check because this is Staten Island, right? Whether there was an easement actually recorded against the property, because maybe it explains what the scope of it is. They did provide this thing called a damage map, but that's not the same thing necessarily as the actual text of an ancient easement, whether or not that's something you can find. It's just, because we also didn't get a deed, so we don't see it traveling along in the deed. So the resulting house, after getting our requested waivers, is tiny compared with its semi-detached neighbors, so this is clearly the minimum variance necessary. No other waivers besides side yards were requested. The near zero lot line side of the house, because it's really just, it's a foot away, and I think zero lot is 6 inches, is adjacent to a driveway, so you're not even really imposing on that adjoining house. The dimensions on the site plan are very difficult to read in PDF form, so I'd like to see if that can be cleared up and resubmitted. It's just a PDF story. Others?
I thought the applicant did a very good job of actually justifying the uniqueness and going through the site analysis. I think they meet in my opinion, they meet the uniqueness finding. And this site, this block has combination of detached and semi-detached, so having a almost semi-detached building, it's not out of context. And as you mentioned, it's just seeking a side yard waiver, not anything else. So I think just clearing out more of the information that we need for factual analysis, I think the application is in good shape.
So for the minimum finding, could they just tell us what the average building width in the study area is? And also on the plans, I see some inconsistencies, like it looks like there's a garage on the cellar plan, but there's no garage door. And also, the plans don't show an interior staircase to get from one floor to another.
Yeah, I think this was like one of those box drawings, just kind of flow chart kind of drawing.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I'm wondering if that's a remnant from, there was a point where the board didn't want to see interior layouts on the drawings that went to DOB, and maybe that's a remnant of
But
that thinking.
there are rooms.
Yeah.
There's just no staircase.
Right.
You know, and there,
Okay.
it looks like a garage, but there's no door in the rendering part. So it's halfway.
Yeah, okay. Neither here nor, yeah, okay. All right, any others? No? Okay.
Okay, this concludes the public review session for November 25th.